Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have my co-founder, Michael Kitces, back on the show today to talk about the 2018 XYPN benchmarking study. For the second year now, we have collected data from our member firms to help us better understand their businesses and how they're operating. In this episode, Michael and I dug into a couple of primary charts, which cover questions like, how much revenue can I expect in my first years of business? How does having experience in the industry make a difference? Does the CFP really matter? Should I have a niche? And more. We put a copy of the specific graphs that we reference in the show notes at xyplanningnetwork.com/180. And you can also download the full study for $197 or free as an XYPN member at xyplanningnetwork.com/study. For advisors thinking about launching a firm, this will help you set realistic expectations about growth and what you can do to help better ensure your success as a business owner. Fun fact, what do many financial advisors have in common? They're often terrible at doing their own bookkeeping, and more importantly, they don't enjoy it. Enter the Bean team at FA Bean Counters powered by XY Planning Network. There's no shame in falling behind in your books. We're all guilty of that from time to time, but if you're leaving money on the table because you haven't filed expenses correctly, you need the Bean team. Start cleaning up your books with a free chart of accounts template. Visit www.fabeancounters.com/XYPN radio to download your copy today. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/180. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here is my interview with Michael. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
It is good to be back. It has been a while.
It really has. I feel like they have gotten longer and longer stretches because we used to do them once a month and then sort of tapered off with busy travel season. And today is a great example of that because we're going to be talking about the 2018 XYPN benchmarking survey, which was released at XYPN Live 2018 in St. Louis back in September. So about just under 2 months ago by the time that this goes live. And your travel schedule, my travel schedule means it took us 2 months to get booked. So,
unfortunately, yes, this is what I fondly call crazy travel season, which is our industry's fascinating ability to cram every possible conference in the fall into like an 8-week stretch from mid-September to mid-November. So I just travel most of the week every week and actually really looking forward to December where I get to be home more.
To be fair, most people aren't going to 30 conferences in 8 weeks, other than maybe some vendors who will do 5 cities in 5 weeks, but most of us aren't.
No, understood. But just it would be nice for those of us who do actually travel to speak at a bunch of these, as well as some of the exhibitors, if our industry would just space the darn things out a little bit more instead of clumping them together. It's a little nutty. So I've just been trying to keep my head above water on our Financial Advisor Success podcast, who just crossed the episode number 100 mark.
Congratulations.
It blows me away that we're coming up on number 200 here for XYPN Radio.
Yeah, just a couple more months because we're at 180 now, which I guess is technically 5 more months. So it'll be March timeframe. We'll have to do some sort of celebration, but yeah, it's amazing. The podcast is a great example of it. It took me forever to get started because I was so afraid of not knowing or how to or being good at interviewing people. That was my biggest fear. I was like, I don't know how. So like I was looking for courses on like, how do you interview people? Like, how do you learn how to interview people? And there is no such thing. And I thought, we'll do this for 6 months. It'll be cool. Get to talk to some people and then be done with it. And I guess we are now 3 years in and continuing on. So
funny how sometimes you just get going and then it sticks. I went through the same thing for my podcast as well, of being an introvert by nature and very much not one for chit chat and small talk kind of stuff. I'm like, so I don't like doing small talk, and I'm going to do an entire entire podcast series of interviews with small talk conversations with people for an hour at a time. Like, this is a little freaky, but at the end of the day, I guess for anybody who's I know, listening to this and thinking about their own direction. Do I want to do a podcast or something? The truth, just as long as you're talking about something that's interesting you and in your domain, and you kind of know enough about your subject matter just to ask stuff that would seem like they'd be good questions to you, it usually turns out they're good questions to everyone that goes just fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's admittedly one of the better ways that we've been able to spread the message of XY Planning Network has been the podcast, and I think we're approaching 500,000 downloads now. I'll have to pull it up while we're chatting, just that. Oh, I'm sorry, we're actually approaching 600,000 downloads now total, and so that it's a great way to know that, 600,000 touch points with folks that may be interested in what we're talking about. So, all right, well, enough meandering. The topic of today's podcast is talking about the benchmarking survey. So this is the second year that we have hired the Ensemble Practice, which is a practice management firm, and one of the things that they do is benchmarking surveys and helping gather and analyze data. So we started this in 2017. Again, so 2 years in, we talked about the first years back in episode 125. So if you go to xyplannetwork.com/125, you can hear Michael and I talking about last year's benchmarking survey and the results, because we're actually going to be talking about some of the same data points, sort of similar graphs, but the evolution. And we really invest quite a bit of money in these things, honestly. Like they're not cheap to do. So it's a big investment financially, but more so time wise for both us and our members to collect all this data, because it's huge, because we really want to see and have the data set to show out, I guess, a couple of things. One being, we want to be realistic about what it means to start a business, which when we start talking numbers, we want to be sure that we're not holding out entrepreneurship as it's all rainbows and unicorns and super easy and just start an RIA and all the clients will break down your door. You won't know what to do with all the money that's coming into your practice. Like, it's just not how it is. And so we want to be sure that we're setting realistic expectations of what can you expect in terms of number of clients, income, what's average, what's high, what's low, what does the CFP do for you? What does having a niche do for you? We talk about it a lot. You should have a niche. You should get the CFP, but does it really matter? And now we have data to sort of back that up. But And the other side being, our firms just operate differently. They don't fit into your standard benchmarking survey that the custodians or some of the other practice management groups are putting out there, because, all they want to know is what's your AUM. And, that just doesn't matter to our advisors. And so anyway, so it's exciting to read through and just see the data set. Before we dive in, if you would like to get a copy of it, they are available for purchase at xyplanningnetwork.com/study. If you are an XY Planning Network member, it is available for free. So there is a small fee. If you are not, just help us recoup some of the cost of generating the data. But if you're interested in starting a firm, quite honestly, this is for you. It's $197. If you do one thing, like actually price your fees appropriately, or wait 6 months to start a firm because you should wait, or select a niche a little earlier on, you will far and exceed any $197 fees that you're paying for the study. But I'll put that out there. So xyplannetwork.com/study. So I guess so let's set the stage with, I guess, some of the stuff we're going to be talking about, because we're going to focus on a few particular charts. And the first one is really trying to set expectations around growth. Because that's what everyone wants to know is, right out of the gate, like 6 months in, I'm going to replace my salary. I'm making $70,000. Let's do it.
How long is it going to take to make my money back?
Yep. Which I get, but when I got fired, that was my thing. Was I was like, all right, I think I was making, I don't know, 50,000, 55,000. I'm like, all right, like I just got to get back to 55, and that should take 6 months. And lo and behold, it took 18, which was actually pretty good.
That's actually faster than most, as we'll see and share when we get into the benchmarking study here. I've always told people and warned people, it takes 3 years. 3 years to, and not just about getting back to your old income, although as we'll talk about in some of the numbers, it turned out that was pretty good for the math alone. But it takes 3 years for your advisory firm to get traction. Just for the growth to really get going. And not that you can't grind out some clients or revenue along the way, because Lord knows we wouldn't stick around for 3 years getting nothing. But it takes 3 years for you showing up at networking meetings, serving your first few clients well so they refer you, even just moving around with some of your friends and family before they actually get to the point of, oh, like, she made that change a few years ago and she's still doing it. Like, I guess she's legit now. She must really be a financial advisor. Like, it sucks, but just it takes everyone around you a while to really decide that they know you, like you, and trust you to be a competent financial advisor. And, if you're going into a new community you're trying to market in, it takes them a while just to figure out who you are and whether you're trustworthy. And even amongst your friends and family, they might know you and like you and think you're trustworthy, but they're still trying to figure out whether you're actually going to stick around and be a financial advisor in a couple of years. And it usually takes a while for friends and family to warm up as well. And we really saw that now that we are 4 years in XYPN. Alan, as you pointed out, we've done the benchmarking study for 2 years, but XYPN started in 2014. We did the study this year in 2018, which means we could look back over 4 years of data, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. And so we went back and asked a lot of members who started with us in 2014, like, how has it gone for 4 years, where we can actually see the trajectory of firms? And the answer is, it really gets going after 3 years, and it really still sucks in the first 3 years.
Yeah, when we look, and we'll try to not just share too many numbers, because I know it can be a little overwhelming to listen on a podcast with too many numbers, but just going years 2014 through 2017, our data shows that in 2014, firms made an average revenue of $4,810. All right, $4,800. Year 2, they made $28,000. All right, year 3, about $70,000, and year 4, $170,000. Now, you can listen to that growth rate. So that's 5,000 year 1, 30,000 year 2, 70,000 year 3, 170,000 year 4. And this really follows the trajectory, and I'll say the emotional trajectory that we see a lot of firms on. And that is in that, the first 6 to 12 months is largely driven by adrenaline and emotion. You're just so excited to be starting a firm.
I'm a business owner. I'm an independent business owner.
I've made it. Like, I'm doing my own thing. I'm out networking. I'm talking to clients. And really, it's that, 6, 9, 12 months where you're finally like, all right, I've made $5,000. What am I doing? And that's when you hit the oh crap phase, the what did I do phase. And that's year 2. Right. And that's where you're out, you're grinding, you're getting a few clients, you're seeing some come in, but the revenue really trails the client sometimes, especially if you're not charging big upfront fees. Even that huge client that comes in spending you $200 a month, they come in halfway through the year, you've still only made $1,200 from that client over the course of 6 months. And so that year 2 is really the what did I do phase. And then you start to approach into year 3. And that's when things start picking up. You start, get a little pep in your step. That's when you're like, all right, I feel like things are getting a little better.
Like, I got my first referral from a client. Like, I got a client in year 1 and they referred someone in year 3. I got like my first good referral.
And, the revenue starting to flow. This is when you're starting to say like, all right, well, maybe, gross, I'm going to make about the same amount of money as I, used to make in my job. It's not the same net, but, things are feeling better. And then going into year 4 is when we see advisors. My experience has been advisors do something. They either they fire a client or they tell a prospective client no. And that's just like this amazing turning point where you're like, whoa, I was able to do that. Because in year 1, there's no way you would have done that. I mean, you would. There's no way you're going to fire a client. And that's when you have the meeting with that prospect that you're like, no, you're not a good fit. So the answer is no. Or you finally let that big client that's paying you $10,000 a year go, and you're like, all right, like that's when you've made it, and you can sort of relax. And that's year 4. And so the emotional journey that we see firm owners go on really through their first 3 years is very much reflected in the income and really the number of clients as well. So in addition to the revenue numbers, we see the average number of clients per year is 5 by the end of your first year, 15 by the end of year 2. Our data shows 17 by the end of year 3, and 34 by the end of year 4. Which, I think there's a couple of lessons to be learned in there. One is, as number of clients goes up, so does revenue. But average revenue per client is also going up. And so you think about $5,000 for 5 clients, $1,000 revenue average, 34 clients for $170,000 in revenue. That's $5,000 a client. And we're going to talk about average revenue per client and some of the things that we see, but we do see this both growth of clients, growth of revenue, and growth of average revenue per client growing throughout all of these numbers.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon to me that first of all, just to see in hard data, real numbers, actual advisors, like average advisor who started from scratch with us, because we deliberately, when we did these numbers, we pulled out all the advisors who transitioned with existing clients from their old firm, because obviously their numbers will look better because they came with clients. Like this,
good. That's a good caveat to make, that this is people who started from scratch, 0 clients.
And on the one hand, to see like $170,000 of revenue in year 4 is just freaking amazing. Like for almost anybody who's coming to this, you're making well more than you were at whatever your prior job was. You may be making 2x or more than whatever you were at your prior job, depending on what you were doing previously. The take-home pay is getting good. The net is getting pretty good. As you pointed out, like your average revenue per client is $5,000. You're working with some more affluent clients, higher income clients, and they're paying you more and they're recognizing your value, and it feels great. And it doesn't change the fact that the average advisor who made 170 in year 4 still made 5 in year 1.
Yep.
Like it sucks for everyone. I wish there was a way around that. I joke sometimes, like part of what we're trying to do here at XYPN is at least make that first year or 2 a little bit less sucky, but it still sucks. It's $5,000 of revenue in year 1. It's less than $30,000 in year 2. And then it's 6X's over the subsequent 24 months. The average member grew more in their 4th year than in the first 3 cumulatively.
Yeah, and really what we're focused on here are, what are the success factors for new firm owners? I mean, if you bring over 100,000 or 200,000 revenue from a previous firm and you're getting started, obviously you're in a very different boat. I mean, this data really speaks to the folks who are starting a firm with 0 clients. And what this tells us is that you need money in the bank. Right, you need to have savings for, I'll say, at least 2 years, if not 3, but you need at least 2 years of savings. Or you need a partner with pretty good income to be able to support your lifestyle, because, running the business is not what gets you. It's your personal expenses and paying the mortgage and car payments and private school or whatever you got on the cash flow. But that's really what will allow you to hang around long enough to hit that $170,000 in year 4. Because again, it sucks for everyone. And that's just a reality, but you can hedge that, and you can, give yourself enough time to be able to stay in business long enough to meet that, that level of success.
Yeah, that financial stability component is really important. I think we got maybe, a little bit of a bad start with a couple of members a few years ago who saw what I guess now is like somewhat infamous article from Sophia Berra, who also happened to be one of our early founding members. She did an article on Nerd's Eye View years ago about how she started her advisory firm for under $10,000 and grew it successfully and found success. And she's had incredible success and actually is well above these numbers on her income trajectory. But it kind of anchored people to this idea of like, I can start my firm for 10 grand and everything will go great. And the truth is, from the pure hard cost of starting a business, Sophia did it on a little bit of a budget, but we do see a lot of members that are still successfully starting in, at least call it the $10,000 to $20,000 range, even if they don't quite get in under 10,000. One of the biggest things that hits you is just standing up a nice looking website actually consumes a couple $1,000s and knocks some people over that line. But it's not like starting a restaurant where you have to buy tons of kitchen equipment and fancy ovens, or starting a manufacturing business where you got to buy factory equipment. Like, it is relatively inexpensive to start a firm, which helps, but what buries you and the challenge point is not that it's so expensive to start a firm. It's just that it takes 3 to 4 years for a good amount of revenue to show up. And it's all about that. Like, it's not that you need a lot of startup capital to start the business, but you need the financial stability in your personal household to be able to cover the bills while you get there. Whether that's, building up some savings and cash that you work through, whether that's a financially stable spouse and you're living on one income and letting your advisory firm be the long-term upside. But I don't know, it's an interesting distinction to me. You don't need a lot of startup capital to start an advisory firm successfully, but you do need financial stability in your personal household.
Yeah, which you're going to see throughout this in terms of age, experience, amount of, a number of clients, amount of money, like all of these things really do play a part. I hope next year we need to ask the question about side hustles and just to be able to see how many people actually have some sort of part-time job themselves. Anecdotally, I do know a lot of advisors have it. It's not always a positive because a lot of times it can be a distraction from growing your business if you're working 20 hours a week for someone else. But again, it all comes down to being in business long enough and being able to survive long enough for the revenue to show up, which sort of leads us to the next point. And that is, advisors know, and I guess listeners know, that we really promote the CFP designation. We encourage our advisors to get the CFP. We don't require it for membership. It's sort of a misnomer, actually. You don't have to have the CFP to join XY Planning Network. However, we do require it to be listed on our Find an Advisor portal. And people say, why? Why does it matter? And it matters for a lot of reasons. But if we want to get down to the dollars and cents of why it matters, I found this data to be really interesting. And so this chart compares the number of clients that an advisor with 5 years or less of experience, 0 to 5 years of experience, compares the difference between CFP and non-CFP and the number of clients that they have. So number of clients by year, 0 to 5 years of experience. The results are just astronomically different. I mean, you're talking about in 2014, on average, the CFP advisor had 6 clients, the non-CFP had 0. And then it goes to, with a CFP, 16 clients, no CFP, 0.4, not even 1 on average. 2016, the advisor with a CFP has 24 clients, and the non-CFP has 4. And then year 4, the CFP has 36 clients and the non-CFP has 10. So all throughout here are just a massive difference. So what do you attribute this, let's just jump to year 4, the difference between 36 clients and 10 in 2017 for these advisors and the difference between having the CFP?
So I think there's ultimately 2 things that drive this kind of interrelated to each other. Number one, as I pointed out earlier, like the fundamental challenge that prospects go through, that even your friends and family go through is, hey, look, I know you, you're a nice guy or gal. Maybe we go back a couple of years, but, I knew you before you were a financial advisor. So just showing up now and saying you're a financial advisor person, like, I know you when we used to drink a lot of beer together and hang out. Like, I don't know that you know anything about money stuff. In fact, maybe I saw you do stupid money things at some point in the past before you learned all this stuff. And it's hard to get credibility until you show up with, say, professional training and a designation like CFP marks that are increasingly well recognized. And suddenly they look at you in a new light. Like, you didn't just go off and hang your shingle doing some new thing. Like, you went and got CFP certification. They probably saw you studying your backside off for it. If you're talking to just prospects that you don't know, it's got credibility associated with it. And it just lifts the trust factor. Not that a lot of clients are necessarily saying, like, I was just Googling around for a CFP and found you, but anybody you get in front of, you come across as a little bit more credible. And particularly when you're in your first few years of being in the business and you don't necessarily have a lot else to go on for credibility, because it's not like you can say you've been doing this for 10 years because you haven't. A little bit of credibility with marks like the CFP certification helps. The second thing, though, that I think actually really drives this, just having seen so many advisors now go through this transition in these tough early years, is the ones who have CFP certification, they know more stuff because you've literally learned it. There's a lot of stuff you learn in that program. And they talk more confidently when they know more stuff. Like it's a confidence booster. And yeah, having the credibility of the letters after your name on your business card or your website or wherever you put them helps a little as well. But still, the most fundamental way that a client decides whether you're trustworthy and worth doing business with is just how confidently you communicate so that you act like you're really valuable and they believe you're really valuable. And CFP certification just seems to build that confidence for a lot of advisors where they talk like they really know what they're talking about and that they can add value, and prospective clients pick up on that and they start showing up. And if you compound that out over a couple of years, you get to gaps like this where the average advisor with CFP certification is at 36 clients after 4 years. And the few that did it with no CFP certification have grounded out only 10 clients in 4 years, which means they're probably doing a lot of side hustles and other things just to make ends meet at that point.
Yeah, I totally agree that confidence is such a huge factor. You can tell the difference between someone who is selling something, which you're selling this service to your prospective client. You can tell when someone's confident when they're not. I'll get on my high horse just a little bit. I get really frustrated by folks who, are coming into the industry. Maybe they're career changers or they're coming over from some, maybe they're coming right out of college, but, like, all right, well, I'll just be a financial planner. I don't need the CFP. Like, what's the CFP going to teach me? And it's like, it's such this level of arrogance that everything that a financial planner is. And for some of us who spent, 4 or 5 years in college getting, degrees in financial planning, or folks that spend 6 to 12 months studying their butts off and then another 6 months in order to study for and pass the exam, you learn a lot in the CFP program. It's why we promote it so much. People say, well, I got the CFA, that should be enough. I'm like, fine, go sit for the CFP and prove that you know as much as a certified financial planner knows about financial planning.
If you've got other credentials like CPA license, CFA marks, like, you can challenge for the exam. You may have to go back and do one capstone course or just give them a sample financial plan, which would be pretty easy because you're going to be producing them for clients on an ongoing basis for your living, and sit for the exam and challenge for the exam. And, either you'll nail it and you'll crush it and you'll have your CFP certification. You can feel good about it, put it on your card and talk a little more confidently. Or you'll go sit for it and not actually pass it and realize there's a little bit more stuff that you need to learn to know this well, which is fine. Now go learn it and then come back with your marks and knowing more to actually help your clients and not do anything wrong and screw anything up because you learned more. In the same way that, I sort of find it ironic, particularly for a lot of CPAs and CFAs that I talk to, that, if we suggested CFP should be allowed to do accounting and manage individual stock portfolios with their CFP certification, a lot of accountants and CFAs I know would scoff at that.
Would lose their minds.
Yes. It turns out that the financial planning stuff is also a specialized domain. It's just different, which is why I tell people, CFPs who want to do tax work, like, you better go get some education beyond CFP certification. And while I think CFP certification is fine for constructing a basic asset allocated diversified portfolio, like, you want to do individual security analysis, like, go get a freaking CFA. You are not learning what you need to learn with your CFP marks alone. Like, these are just different domains. So learn the information. If you're that confident you know it, like, just go challenge for the exam. If you're trying to build a business where you want to be a financial advisor and make, $100,000 or hundreds of thousands of dollars for the next 10, 20, 30 years, like, spend the $500 on the CFP exam and prove your point and move on.
Yeah, just to clarify for listeners, challenge the exam. When you say that, what you're referring to is, the CFP requires that you go through 7 educational courses, 6 sort of core courses: tax, retirement, estate, risk management, that sort of thing. And then there's a 7th capstone class that, where you write a financial plan. So if you have these designations, you can challenge and basically that have that requirement waived, where you don't actually have to go through all the 6 courses. You are required to have the capstone class now. So basically, with a CFA, CPA, PhD, JD, there's a list of them. You get basically your education requirement waived. I would argue that you shouldn't. and you should go take those classes because you will learn a lot. But I don't know what it is about financial planning that gives this illusion, I guess, that there's not a lot to know and just like anybody can do it.
Well, I think I know where the illusion comes from. The illusion comes from the fact that there are still literally hundreds of thousands of people out there who put financial advisor on their business card, but have no training, have no education, may have very little experience, but they got a sales license and their broker dealer, instead of having them put, investment security salesperson on their card, which is literally what the Series 7 exam lets you sell, they write financial advisor. And I think a bunch of CPAs and CFAs, and frankly, lots of consumers have had experiences with people who wrote financial advisor on their business card, but they didn't actually know all that much and presume, well, that means I can hang my shingle and be a financial advisor as well. And the fact that I've already got my CPA or CFA background means I know way more than the average financial advisor out there, which technically is actually true because the average is pretty low because there's a lot of salespeople that put financial advisor on their card. But if you actually want to get paid for advice, right, because that's what we do at XY Planning Network, like there are no products here. You don't get to sell stuff. We're fee only. Like you have to actually get paid for your advice. And if you want to get paid for your advice, you got to know some stuff that's valuable that people will pay for.
So, we're talking about confidence, education, like, do you know what you're talking about? All that sort of thing. So we also broke out another graph, which shows the source of new clients for all advisors, CFP versus non-CFP. So this is no longer just in the first 5 years. So this is looking at everyone that took the survey. Where do they find new clients? And I can't read through all of this because it's 12 different sections. But what I will tell you is with a CFP wins out in every single category but one, which we're going to talk about. With a CFP, you get these advisors report 4 to 5 times more clients from referrals from existing clients. So advisors with a CFP are getting astronomically more client referrals than folks without the CFP. They're actually getting clients from Google search. Right? Non-CFPs, it actually says 0 clients from Google search, whereas CFPs are getting on average 3 clients from a Google search. When we look at referrals from center of influence, it's higher for CFP. XYPN, NAPFA, both of these require the CFP. So you see that our advisors are getting clients from those sources, but they're getting clients from all of these other places. Social media, seminars. We still have people doing seminars, apparently. Blogging, online advertising. CFP wins out in every single category, except one, which is really interesting. Networking and general business development. On average, the advisor with a CFP gets 2.7 clients from that activity, whereas without the CFP, 5.3 clients. So right about double. What do you think? What do you attribute the fact that non-CFPs actually went out in this one category?
Well, because if you don't have CFP certification and you're not getting referrals from existing clients because you hardly have any, and you're not getting anything from online Google searches, blogging, and social media because they show up on your website and they decide you're not credible. And you're not getting much from referrals from centers of influence because you're not as credible. And you're not getting anything from NAPFA and XYPN finding advisor pages because you're not allowed to be listed there. Like literally the only thing left is just go talk to tons of people and hope some of them do business with you, which is why that's where almost all of the new business development comes from for non-CFPs. Like it's the only thing left because the other channels aren't working. And conversely, like why do we see that activity so much lower with CFPs? Well, if you're getting a bunch of referrals from existing clients, they're coming to you from Google searches, they're coming to you from blogging, they're coming to you from social media, they're coming to you through NAPFA, they're coming to you through XYPN's Find Advisor portal, and you're seeing an uptick in referrals from centers of influence. You don't go to a lot of generic business networking meetings anymore because you don't have to, because you're getting 10, 20 clients from all the other categories. So to me, this sort of epitomizes and emphasizes like why CFP certification is so important and why it's a lot more. Because I know we have a few members who are non-CFPs and have expressed some frustration at some points that they can't be listed on these XYPN Find Advisor pages and NAPFA pages. We've had prospective members who have expressed frustration with that. And it is true, as we see in the data here and you can see in the charts, when you go get your copy of the study that, yes, advisors with CFP certification get more clients from those sources. They also get more clients from every other source as well, many of which are much larger in client volume than just the NAPFA and XYPN Find an Advisor pages. We see some coming through there, but it's not the dominant business channel. And to me, that just, again, emphasizes the point, like the credibility enhancement from CFP certification in today's environment where it's competitive to convince clients like why they should pay an advisor and why they should pay you and not any of the other advisors that they might be talking to. The CFP certification matters. It has a real, incredibly measurable, tangible impact way beyond just being listed on NAPFA and XYPN, although those help too.
Yeah, it's one of those things we've always said that it's not the reason to join XY. It's not a selling point. It's icing on the cake. If you join and, according to this, you'll get on average one client a year. Great bonus, helps pay the fee, quite honestly.
Yep.
But it's not the reason to join. There's so many other reasons to join XY, but there's so many other reasons to get the CFP than just being able to be listed on a couple of websites. So switching gears, when we, pretty much every episode, I don't think we have been able to go a single episode without me using the word niche. As niche as many of you choose to mispronounce, but we won't have to talk about it.
It is worth pointing out that is the first time it's been said. We are more than 30 minutes into this episode. That might actually be a record for us.
That is a true story. For us, definitely. We've started using the hashtag riches in the niches. And people want to know, does the niche really work? Do I really need a niche? And we get a lot of pushback from this, from many XYPN members, from many advisors that are out there that just think we're nuts. That, we don't need a niche. When I first start a firm, I'm going to take everyone who can fog a mirror and bring in, whoever, because that's going to help me grow my practice. So we have another interesting graph here. I'm going to try to explain this, and Michael, help me if I screw this up. So basically what this is doing is going back to the original income number that we shared with you. So just as a reminder, year one, $5,000 in revenue, year two, $30,000 in revenue, and it goes on from there. We're going to focus on those 2 years, $5,000 and $30,000. And what this does is it goes, so basically that was for a cohort that was started in year 2014 and sort of followed them for 4 years.
Yeah. And worth noting in kind of the context of what's coming in the next data points here, like most of our early members were not in niches because, we hadn't got the message out yet. They were just starting from scratch. We were frankly starting from scratch because XYPN had just started that year. So everybody was just kind of figuring all this stuff out as they went. And so the key point here for what we're going to talk about and compare to in a moment is that income trajectory, 530, 70, 170, $1,000 of income, that was essentially the cohort that had very few niches. There were a few members in there that had niches from the 2014 join year, but most of them who started with us from scratch did not have any kind of niche or specialization. They were just, I'm a financial advisor. I hopefully have my CFP certification. I'd love to give you some advice. Would you like to work with me?
Yeah, really our niche was young professionals. For that early cohort, it was mine as well when I started my firm. So focusing on the first 2 years in business in the different cohorts, one cohort started in 2014. The other cohort would have started, I guess, in 2017 because this data would
It's 2016.
So you'd have 2016 and 2017 in business. So we're comparing like groups. And again, 5,000 in revenue year one, 30,000 in revenue year two, 5 clients year one, 15 clients year two. All right, that was where the original cohort was. When we compare to this second cohort, this later cohort that has a niche, all right, and I believe niche was defined as at least 50% of their clients were inside the niche. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so at least 50% of their clients are inside the niche. Instead of $5,000 a year, they made $16,000 in their first year. 3 times as much. They didn't have just 5 clients. They had over 16 clients on average. And that carries into year two. From 28,000, I've been saying 30, I'm rounding up. So around 28,000 for the non-niche, 45,000 in revenue in year two for the niche clients. And not just 15 clients, but 31. Those are really big numbers. Now, we don't have enough data to sit here and say, like, this is clearly proven, niches always work, but it is really validating to me to continue to preach the message of have a niche, have a focus, have a target market, because honestly, it makes those first 2 years suck a whole lot worse.
Yeah, this was powerful for us. Even by 2016, we had been talking a whole lot about niches. We'd gotten this podcast underway, so we'd been being the drum there as well, if you go back and listen even to some of the early episodes. And so what we found now is by 2016, almost 80% of the members who started in 2016 are operating in niches now. Still 20% who are not, but almost 80% of them who are. And just that greater niche focus took year one income from $5,000 to $16,000 and year two income from basically $28,000, a little under 30, up to almost $45,000. So like by year two, it's a 50% lift in revenue on how much faster they're growing because they have a niche focus. Now we don't know where they are in year three and year four yet to bear out the rest of the comparison, because if they started in 2016, they're still doing year three now. So when we come back for this benchmarking study in a couple of months, we'll have some new data to report out to you about whether the trend continued as we'd certainly expect and are seeing here on the trajectory in year three and going forward. But it just really does make the point that greater focus works. We spend so much time worrying if we pick a niche about all the people who are going to say no because they don't fit your niche. And the truth is, most people are going to say no to you anyways, particularly if you're a newer advisor. They haven't decided if they're going to trust you. And I mean, just think about all the strangers you met over the past week. Just, I don't know, all the various interactions you have in your life. How many strangers did you meet in the last week? How many of them did business with you? I'm going to bet you met dozens of people, maybe hundreds, and the number of people who did business with you were zero, right? Like when I bump into someone on the street or in the store or whatever it is, like I don't get them as clients too often. But when you have a niche and you have some specialization, whatever it is, I specialize in recent divorcees. Boy, if you're just chit-chatting with one of those folks and you happen to point out that you specialize in recent divorcees and one of the 100 people you meet this week actually is a recent divorcee, you have an instant prospect who bonds with you. And that's really ultimately the phenomenon that makes these growth rates work and happen faster the way that they are. Like, most people we meet are just not going to do business with us. Frankly, most people we meet, we don't spend that much time with anyways. Like, you meet, you chit-chat, maybe make a little small talk and you move on. But when you've got some niche or specialization and you happen to bump into someone who fits that, or someone who knows someone who fits that, suddenly people connect. And, even for the average person in a niche here, they got 16 clients in their first year. The average person without a niche had 5 clients in their first year. That still means like 99% of the people you met the past year didn't work with you either way. But when you pick up just a couple more who do, one every month, because that's really the difference, it's just one a month, one more person a month that you meet that actually connects with that niche message and decides to do business with you. And suddenly after 2 years, your income's up 50% over where it would have been.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see this data sliced out to see if a niche can actually overcome not having the CFP. I don't think it fully does, but I do think it offsets it. And I'm not advocating for, if you don't have the CFP, just go have a niche. But it's that powerful that having a clear focus and a clear understanding and a clear expertise, which quite honestly leads to confidence, which is what so much of we believe having the CFP does. That having that confidence that you're the right advisor, the best advisor with the highest level of expertise for a particular client base does matter. And that it can, again, it's going to have a powerful effect on your business. I bet if we slice this out and show CFP with a niche, it's even higher. That this data is going to be brought down by our non-niche, non-CFPs or, niche non-CFPs.
Yeah, it really is powerful. And I always feel compelled to point out, we do drink our own Kool-Aid, I guess.
What are you talking about? We don't know anything about having a niche.
XY Planning Network, so we launched a network that said, first of all, let's only work with fee-only advisors, which means we carved out probably somewhere between 80 or 90% of them that have no broker-dealer affiliation. Then we said, we're only going to do a model that's not based on AUM, which means we eliminated 95% of the fee-only RIAs. Then we said, wait, and we're only going to work with firms that do this for young people, recognizing there's more CFPs over 70 than under the age of 30. So we took a niche of advisors, then took a niche of that, then took a niche of that in order to decide who we wanted to serve at XY Planning Network. And now we're 800 advisors and 30 plus employees and a fast growing company. It's this stuff works. It really does. What we do and what we espouse and what we focus on at XYPN, still huge swaths of the industry think we're completely nuts. And that's fine because they weren't really going to work with us anyways. But the people who actually want to do this and want a platform to help them find their way to us, get referred to us, find us in Google searches and all the different ways that you can find a targeted business, and off we grow. It's this stuff works. I mean, we don't just say it for saying it. We live it. We know it works because we've done it in our own model here. And I've done it actually with most of the businesses that I've been involved with over the years. The focus works because at the end of the day, most people aren't going to do business with you anyways. But the more focused you are, the more you're perfect for the people that you seek to help in the first place, that you really are seeking to help in the first place.
Yeah, it's so true. All right. So moving on to the next graph. And this next chart really talks about revenue over time with more experience. So what this chart does is it breaks down advisors that have 0 to 3 years of experience, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 plus years of advisory experience. And what this shows is what you would expect. And that is that the more experience you have means you make more money per year as an advisor. What is a little surprising is just how big the difference is. So on average, an average advisor across all cohorts is making about $64,000 per year in terms of revenue.
Now, bearing in mind, because I know for some folks that feels like a low number for financial advisors, but because XYPN has grown so fast, literally more than 50% of our entire membership was still in their first year of the business when they did this survey.
Yeah, that's your point.
The number is that low in part just because there's a whole lot of advisors who are getting started here at different stages of experience, which we're going to highlight and point out in a moment here. But there was a lot of this is a mixture. Well, I should say this is a mixture of advisors who are new, advisors who are experienced, advisors who are starting from scratch, and advisors who've been doing this for a while.
So $64,000 on average. When you look at 10 plus years of experience, almost $120,000 of revenue on average. It's about $117,000. It's almost $120,000 if you have 10 plus years of experience. Back that out to 5 to 10 years of experience, that $120,000 becomes $68,000. Back down to the 3 to 5 years of experience, $50,000. Go down to the 0 to 3 years, $18,000. Now, all of these pieces are working together in the sense that if you're in your first 3 years, you probably don't have the CFP, right? Because you need 3 years of work experience to use the CFP designation. So that 0 to 3 years is probably folks that also do not have the CFP. But to go from $18,000 a year to $50,000 a year, simply because you have a couple more years of experience, is really telling on the power that experience brings. Now, I am one, I'm not an experienced guy. I'm a jump in and figure it out as you go. But experience is so valuable to be able to watch how other advisors have done it, just to be able to learn and have a mentor and be able to learn from the folks that have been doing this for years, to be able to learn yourself from doing with the mentor, hopefully, and oversight. But it's also validation on why we push back so much on folks that are coming out of college and they're like, all right, I'm going to start a firm. And I have to be really careful when I go speak at colleges, because I love going and talking to students, but I have to be very careful to not give the impression that you can start your own RIA fresh out of college, because you can't. All right. I can count on one hand the number of folks I've seen do that successfully.
Yeah, unfortunately, you were basically one of them. So you're tragically too inspirational sometimes for impressionable young students.
I was a couple of years out. I had a couple of years. I had the CFP. I had the master's. Like I was out a little bit. I was not 22.
Yeah. All right.
It was the ripe age of 25. But yeah, don't do what I did. I was stupid.
Well, but and even making that point, like even at the point you went out and started your own firm, you still actually had your CFP certification done in about 3 years of experience. Granted, you spent some of that time getting fired from a couple of different firms, but you did some planning along the way before you got to taking that leap. It's one of those things. Like I went through. I think we all do when we're young and early in our careers, that you just say like, damn it, I want to go do my thing. Don't give me all this earn your experience, pay your dues crap. But like the simple reality of the numbers is the experience matters. It's ludicrously powerful. This study for XYPN we had just done across advisors that were 0 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus years of experience. We actually did an expanded version of this on the Kitces platform recently. We did a study on financial planning process and how advisors do their financial planning. And part of what we asked, just because we want to understand advisor backgrounds, was like how many years of experience you had and what your income was in your practice. Because we wanted to understand, like, are there things that high income advisors do differently than the rest, sort of an evaluation of best practices. And one of the things we found in that data is this phenomenon that advisors with more years of experience make more money, literally held in a perfect straight line in the data for advisors all the way from 1 year of experience to 40 years of experience. Every additional year of experience increased the average income of the advisor in a perfectly straight line. There wasn't even a hiccup. The only turn was after 40 years of experience, it turned down just slightly. The caveat was it turned down from an average of almost $400,000 a year to an average of just $350,000 a year. And it only turned down because if you think about the math, if you've been in for 40 plus years, like you're in your 60s or actually probably your 70s. So we did manage to prove in the data that if you've been successful for 40 plus years, having started in the business in the Nixon administration, your income might come down a little because you probably start slowing down in your 70s. That was the only thing that pulled average income down as years of experience increased. You have to get to your 70s and decide you slow down. Like just the power of experience in our industry is insanely powerful. And it's really not just a pay your dues thing. It's you screw up less conversations with clients after you've had the conversation, done it wrong with a bunch of clients. And so like, well, that didn't go well. I'm not going to have the conversation that way next time. It impacts conversations you have with clients, how you handle tough situations, prospecting and business development, getting clients, just your confidence to be able to communicate effectively. When you've done it long enough, it gets kind of second nature and you can have some good confident conversations. You get more credible. Eventually you get established in your community. You become a go-to person that compounds out more business. Like every possible thing that can come at you that helps all compounds with experience. Now, obviously, that's nice to say for the people who have experience, not so helpful for those of us who don't have it yet and are still working towards this. But it's part of why we pound the table so hard for things like get your CFP certification before you join XYPN. Part of that is just because the CFP marks help and the education is good, as we've talked about here. It's also because you can't get those marks unless you got a couple years of experience, and the experience helps. It matters. If you're ever on the fence about whether to take the leap and start your own firm, if there's one thing you can draw from the data on this, it's that it's okay if you want to wait another year or two and get a little more experience and maybe build up a little bit more cash savings and a little more financial stability for yourself. Like this is a career you can do for decades. Waiting a little bit longer to make sure you've got a good foundation for yourself and increases the odds you get to stick around for 40 years is what really matters in the long run. And the experience just carries it. You just get more comfortable with all the things you got to deal with, being an advisor, being a business owner, being a business developer, everything else that goes with it, the more experience you have, the easier it gets. It's not easy, but it gets
Just
easier.
a little easier. Yeah. And, we actually recently went through with our business coach at XYPN Network, went through sort of helping to define who is our ideal member. And, XY gets a bad rap for, it's just a bunch of 22-year-old planners fresh out of college, lack of experience. And the truth is, our ideal advisor, I mean, your typical member is 38 years old. That's the median age of our members. The vast majority, I'll say astronomically more advisors in our network in their 30s than in their 20s. We only have a handful in their 20s. And they have 5 to 10 years of experience. So when we look at, what does it take to be successful starting your own firm? I would say 5 to 10 years of experience, having the CFP designation, having savings in the bank to cover, 1, 2, 3 years of living expenses and or a financially stable partner that's providing that income. And it's being able to define who you're the best at serving. It's having that niche. Having all of those pieces in place doesn't guarantee success. But I will say, like, when you look at all of this data, it just continues to reiterate this message of there are things that you can do to make it easier on yourself and to help you be more successful. And those are things you can control. And to Michael's point, you may have to wait a year, 2 years, 5 years, depending on your situation. You may have to wait. But it'll be worth it because it's a lot better to wait 3 or 5 years to save up a little more money, get that CFP, get that experience, and then start a firm and have the success foundation, points in place, as opposed to starting a firm today and failing and then having to go get a job after burning through all your savings and then start saving up some more money. And then you're 10 years out from where you could have been. So just be patient.
And sadly, I know a few scenarios like that have gone worse for people who launched too earlier with not enough savings and either, burn through their savings and they're not going to have enough time to save up again, or, life circumstances change. Now they've got marriage, kids, other things, and it's a little harder to save at this point. And I've even seen a few that, their problem is they launched too early when they weren't really ready and experienced yet. And their spouse was not so happy with how it turned out. And now they build up some savings to try to go out and do it again. And their spouse is saying, you did this once.
Tried that.
I'm not supporting you again. This was stressful for our household the first time. And, if you're married and you're trying to do this and your spouse is not supportive, it is not going to go well.
It will
because
not work.
This is hard. I mean, again, like if you are on track to do $170,000 of revenue in your 4th year, and then it only compounds from there, more upside. Even if you're on track for that, on average, you will barely get $30,000 of gross revenue from the first 2 years combined before your business expenses. If your spouse is not on board, it's going to be a rough 2 years in your house.
Yeah. Well, one of the myths, I think, of entrepreneurship is that it's just really stressful for the entrepreneur. It is even more stressful for the partner at home because many times they're not the risk-taking entrepreneur.
That's why they have the good, stable job with the stable income.
Hopefully so. Yeah, it's a great point that, it's a tough road and you need that support at home. I would venture to say that if you go to launch a business and your spouse is not on board, you are choosing between your spouse and your business. And quite honestly, we hear a lot of advisors that launch a business and ultimately get divorced. And I'm not going to say the business caused the divorce, but, you may have married a partner that wasn't on board with entrepreneurship, or, you may have made a decision that they weren't supportive of you, or you just didn't wait until they were ready. But it's a tough road.
Yeah, it really is. And so, again, just for people who are looking at launching and anxious to launch and excited about it, it's fantastic. Like, bundle up all that energy, enthusiasm, because you will need it to get through the rough first year or two. Even if it's going to go really well in the long run, it's still hard for everyone in the first year or two. But if you're going to do this as a successful career for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how old you are as you're coming in, it's okay to take a little more time to get your financial stability in place and to get your experience, and then launch when you maximize the odds that you'll succeed.
So switching gears a little bit, we've really been talking about the components that lead to success and sort of revenue growth over time. So our final two graphs sort of tie together, but they're looking at fees over time as well as fee changes over time. So basically, we have one graph that shows the highest and lowest fees charged to any one client. So basically, I have one client that pays me $4,800 and I have one that pays me $800 a year. And so we're looking at this range basically. And it's really interesting to see, no surprise, that the lower end fee over years of experience. So this is also looking at advisors with 0 to 3 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus years of experience, that the low fee hangs around $1,000. We all have a client paying us $1,000 a year that we've had for forever. But the upper end increases over time. So it starts out at the most any one client is paying me for a year of services is $4,800 if I have 0 to 3 years of experience. That increases to $5,500 a year with 3 to 5 years of experience. That goes to $5,800. And then with a 10 plus year experience, it goes to $10,000. So on average, advisors with 10 plus years of experience, they have at least one client paying them $10,000 for financial planning. And what we see, I think there's two components to this, but one of the big ones is that we're seeing fees increase over time. Confidence increases, capacity increases, expertise increases, because similar to last year and what we saw from our data last year, which blew my mind because I have never, I will say very rarely, if ever, do you ever see the number 100% in any data set. And 2 years in a row now, 100% of XYPN members have raised their fees in their first 3 years of business. 100%, which is just incredible. And it just goes to show that over time, with confidence, with expertise, means you're raising your fees. And that leads to a lot of the numbers that we were talking about earlier. How do you go from 70 to 170,000 in revenue? Well, you double your clients and you raise your fees by 50%.
Yeah. And, and I get it. I mean, so for some people, I'm sure there's a little bit of fee discounting that goes on the first year or two because they just want to get any clients and they'll even sometimes discount their fees and compromise their own value because they're just trying to get some clients in the door and revenue going. And some advisors raise their fees over time because they just actually build up more experience, more competencies, more knowledge, and therefore can command a higher price. But as you said, that explains why a bunch of advisors raise fees. That doesn't explain why 100.0% of advisors raise their fees in their first 3 years, a data point that we've seen repeated now in both of the studies that we did with each new cohort that comes through that's been doing this for 3+ years.
What's really interesting to me is the offset, because not only do we look at who increased fees, we also asked who decreased fees. And in year one, 26% of advisors have raised their fees already. 4% have lowered. All right, 26% to 4%. By the end of year two, 70% have raised their fees. Only 2% have decreased their fees. What that means is whatever number you have in your head, it's low, it's not high.
Yeah, and if anything, again, because this data goes across all of the advisors that join, my gut is that 2 or 3% that decrease their fees in their first year or two are probably advisors who are already in the industry with experience and clients who are maybe used to making some good income from commissions and product sales, and then try to charge their client a fee equal to the old commission that they used to generate and realize that it's actually kind of hard to do. Commissions are front loaded for a reason. It's sometimes hard to front load fees that much. And they have to adjust what's really not an adjustment of you're less valuable, but just this is what happens when you levelize your compensation into ongoing relationships. It's actually the same problem that any advisor has when they just want to switch from the commission-based model to the fee-based model in general. If even back when I started, if I got a $100,000 client 20 years ago, and I could get them to invest $100,000 into an A-share mutual fund, I was getting paid 5%. Actually, some of them paid 5.75, but I was getting paid 5%. It's like I get the client with the $100,000 rollover. I get a $5,000 check in a couple of weeks once the dollars clear. If I get the $100,000 client into an advisory account, I'm going to charge him 1% a year, which means instead of getting $5,000, I'm going to get $1,000. And I don't even get the $1,000 up front. I get $250 when the first quarterly bill goes off 2 or 3 months from now. And so I've gone from $5,000 up front to $250 in a couple of months. Now, when you add that up and compound that out over time and do that with a whole bunch of clients, it adds up to some really good income, as we've talked about before. But if you make the transition in and you don't have a plan for this income transition in the first place, and you were used to getting $5,000 from that client, and now you're going to get $250, you say, well, I'm going to make up for it by just charging them a $5,000 fee, and you don't actually have a lot of years of experience to give advice that's worth $5,000 fees, it gets really challenging. And I think that's where we see this small subset of advisors that are actually reducing fees in the first year or two. All the fee reductions go away after 2 years, though. Anybody who comes in on that transition by 2 years in, you've made the transition, you've set a new floor for your fees. Now you're building your confidence, your value proposition, the rest. And even the advisors who lower their fees in year 1 and 2 are raising their fees by year 3.
Yeah, it's really just, it's just amazing. Like I said, you just, having done research in grad school and taken more stats classes than I care to admit, I've just never seen 100% on anything, much less 2 years in a row. It'll be interesting to see if this trend continues, because we're doing a lot more work now with advisors in that first sort of during the launch phase to say, hey, you got to raise your fees. Like whatever you have in your head, go up 50%. All right. Like if you think you're going to charge $100 a month, do it. $150. All right. $150 a month. If you think $200, go to $300 because you're worth it. Right. If you want to come in and argue with me that, your financial planning service isn't worth $150 or $200 a month, I can push back on that all day. Because quite honestly, if you're not providing that much value to the average client that's able to pay that fee, just find a different job. Go back and get some more years of experience and come back again when you're ready to charge a higher number. So, what this tells us is both, all these things are tied together. It's not simply that, everyone's underpricing in their first year and that's the only part of the story. There's a lot to this story around confidence, around learning your market, around changing niches. Quite honestly, we see people actually select a niche and then that's when their fees go up because they realize their target market can afford to pay more. So there's so much that.
Or you pick a target market that can afford to pay more. Absolutely.
You go from generic, like I work with young professionals for somewhere between $100 and $1,000 a month, to where you say, okay, I work with this specific niche market that pays me $400 a month. And that's what it is. And, seeing that top end fee continue to go up, just again, it shows advisors are raising their fees and they're able to work with clients that have more complex issues. It doesn't mean in order to be successful, you have to go out and work with clients that pay you on average $10,000. Okay. Again, that's a single data point of the highest fee of any one client is $10,000. That doesn't mean a $10,000 average. Again, if we go back and look at that high end at $170,000 in year 4, it's around $5,000 a client when you do the math. So maybe you have some paying you 7, some paying you 3, and it all averages out. But, ultimately raising your fees 50% will be the difference between, hitting that 170 number or falling short and hitting hitting 120,000, which is certainly not failure, but it is a little easier when you're actually being paid appropriately for the work that you're doing. So we're going to drop all of these graphs, and I'll go back and mention this in the intro as well, that we'll put all these graphs in the show notes at xyplanningnetwork.com/180, so that you can follow along. I know it's a lot of numbers and a lot of data. And again, you can go download the study for that $197 fee at xyplanningnetwork.com/study. If you want to be able to dig in, there are dozens and dozens of graphs. We've really picked out the ones that we felt like were relevant. Most relevant, I should say, but you'll probably find a lot of interesting tidbits all throughout that. And there's no doubt that it will help you, especially if you're thinking about starting a firm or thinking about launching into this area of working with younger clients, that you absolutely can be successful doing it. So, any final thoughts, Michael, as we wrap this up?
For me, again, the The biggest data points to me of the whole thing were simply $170,000 of revenue in year 4 from the average advisor that started from scratch. Obviously, it's an average, so some are lower as well as some being higher. But the model works. And if you've got CFP certification and a niche, it's just working better. But even for everyone that it works for, the first year or two sucks. We continue to try to do more at XYPN to figure out how to make that first year or two a little less sucky. But, for anybody maybe who's listening who already is a member, is in that phase, just all I can tell you is keep going. It gets better. It really does. It just takes a while to build that trust and credibility in your marketplace, and CFP certification to just help it. And if you're looking at coming into making this transition and joining XYPN, incredible potential. Again, that's 170 of revenue in year 4. For a lot of advisors that are going to keep compounding that for 30 or 40 years. Now, at some point, you may decide it's enough money and you want to work a little less hard and do some other stuff with your family or travel the world or whatever. So all the best to you. But it's an incredible long-term career, but you have to have a plan about how you're going to deal with those first few years. And that's financial stability, not to handle the cost of the business, but just your household costs. And that's just how you're going to prepare for the mental game of it's tough and there aren't many clients, and there isn't much money for anybody in that first year or two. So, we encourage study groups. We form them for all the firms that launch under XYPN. But, that means spousal support and family support as well. It's such a great opportunity in the long run, but it's still rough for the first few years for pretty much everyone. So if you're in it, keep chugging along. And if you're planning it, just have a plan for it.
Know it's coming and it will pass if you're able to stay in business long enough. So awesome. Well, thanks again, Michael, for late night recording to be able to talk about the benchmarking survey. I'm glad we were finally able to fit this in. Hopefully it was helpful for all the listeners, particularly those that are, like I said, in the middle of it and trying to compare themselves to sort of where others are at. It's hard to know. And those who are thinking about launching, because we want you to be prepared and want you to have realistic expectations of what the next couple of years are going to look like for you. So thanks everybody for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Fun fact, what do many financial advisors have in common? They're often terrible at doing their own bookkeeping, and more importantly, they don't enjoy it. Enter the Bean team at FA Bean Counters, powered by XY Planning Network. There's no shame in falling behind in your books. We're all guilty of that from time to time, but if you're leaving money on the table because you haven't filed expenses correctly, you need the Bean team. Start cleaning up your books with a free chart of accounts template. Visit www.fabeancounters.com/XYPN radio to download your copy today. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitces, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.